Welcome back, Sebastian here. So today I'm going to be reviewing Ferrari's 2024 F1 season. So I think, overall, I think Ferrari will be quite satisfied with how their 2024 F1 season went. 5 race wins, bunch of pole positions, second in the championship, very, very close to winning that Constructors' Championship, pushing McLaren all the way to Abu Dhabi for that Constructors' fight. But I do think, obviously, there's going to be very, very high expectations next year with, of course, Lewis Hamilton coming in. But we're not quite ready to talk about 2025 just yet. So let's get started talking about wrapping up 2024. So first, taking a look at the drivers and the driver head-to-head. So, of course, this will only include a lot of these stats will only include 23 races, as, of course, Carlos Sainz did not race at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. So first, taking a look at qualifying stats. So Leclerc won the qualifying head-to-head battle 14-9. So again, a bit of a comfortable margin there. But when you look at a median qualifying gap, 8 thousandths of a second, extremely close, which suggested that there were many battles between the two of them where things were basically decided by very, very small margin. So again, does tell a bit of an interesting picture. And I think arguably this was Sainz's strongest year in qualifying out of the 4 years against Leclerc. When you look at average starting and finishing position for Leclerc, 5.57, for Sainz 5.74. So again, that kind of highlights how close things were between the pair of them. When you look at average finishing position, again, pretty close. Leclerc 3.95, and for Sainz 4.05. When you look at kind of more conventional stats, again, pretty close. Less close than for the last two categories, but for wins, 3 for Leclerc, of course, coming at Monaco, Monza, and at the US Grand Prix at Coda. And for Sainz, his 2 wins, of course, coming in Australia and at Mexico City. For podiums, 13 for Leclerc, second highest total of any driver in the field, I think tied with Norris, just one behind Verstappen. And for Sainz, 9 podiums as well, so pretty good total for him. Pole positions, 3 for Leclerc, 1 for Sainz. When you look at more conventional stats for points, for example, for the races where both drivers were involved, so again, not Saudi Arabia, Leclerc 340 points, Sainz 290. Of course, for Leclerc, he scored 16 points at Saudi Arabia, so his total for the whole season would have been 356. But for Leclerc, finished third in the championship, pretty close to Norris in the end, and for Sainz, he finished in 5th. When you look at race head-to-head for races where both drivers finished, 12-5 in Leclerc, or 12-8 in Leclerc's favor. Looking at my expected points model and power rankings, so these include all races, so this will include the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. For Leclerc, 19.5 points above expected, or 106%. The model didn't rate Sainz's season quite as highly, a negative 36.59, or 88%. So again, a little bit less than expected, but I do think it kind of highlights just how strong Leclerc's season was from a race perspective. We've talked about how good of a qualifier he is, but I think this was really a season that showed that his race pace is very, very impressive, and it's something that, should Ferrari come up with a competitive car for 2025, I think he has a very good chance of winning the championship. That being said, for Sainz, not a terrible season either, and again, for many of his seasons at Ferrari, he's been basically just a little bit below 100%. So again, I think it's not too bad all around though. When you look at average power rankings, for Leclerc 5.33, which ranks 3rd, so again, interestingly, behind Norris, but I would say that Leclerc I think was the slightly better driver of the two over the course of the season. It's just he had that awful run between Canada and Britain, and while those were a lot of those races were things that were outside of his control, you can't really give a high score on a power ranking for finishing 2 laps down, for example. And for Sainz, 6.87, which ranks 5th, so again matches his championship position perfectly there. Now, when you look at their 4 years as teammates together, it's a pretty interesting matchup. So when you look at qualifying, for example, the qualifying gap, the first 2 years was about half a tenth in Leclerc's favor. final year, 2023, the gap actually went up to about almost a tenth and a half of a second before, the gap became much closer this past season. So interesting to see how that's evolved over time, especially since, Sainz, again, I think at this point he's on the wrong side of 30. And for drivers, qualifying generally peaks when they're in their 20s. So it's interesting to see that, the qualifying gap's actually at its smallest this past year. When you look at the race model, though, it kind of trends the opposite direction. The closest year between of the four between Leclerc and Sainz was actually the first year, 2021. I know Sainz finished ahead of Leclerc in the championship that year, but the race model tries to take other factors into account, such as average finishing position, and how far they can drivers can progress from their starting position, for example. And so the model had a gave a very slight edge to Leclerc for 2021, despite not winning the points head to head. But then again, that gap goes up for 2022, 23, and 24, where you can see it basically hovers around between 0.5 to 0.4 in Leclerc's favor. So again, very, very consistent those last 3 years as teammates together. Now, looking at some of the Ferrari's team stats, point 652, which ranks second, average pole gap 0.339, which ranks third. So again, they were a little bit worse than Red Bull over the course of the whole season. An average minimum finishing position 2.46, which ranks second. So again, bit of a surprise that they end up ahead of Red Bull for that last stat, but again, it really shows really strong progress for Ferrari, as I think our last slide will kind of indicate. Now, when you look at average pole gap over the course of the season, this is 3 race rolling average. You can see first quarter of the season or so, Ferrari were Red Bull's closest challenger, but still they're about 3/10 or so off of the Red Bulls. And then unfortunately, they kind of slid backwards. And then, of course, towards, I think, Monaco or so, that's where the average kind of reached its best point for at least a while, where they were basically about a 10th off pole around Monaco or so. And then that's kind of where things started to go downhill for Ferrari, as they basically, their average pole gap, you can see, basically slides all the way to basically the Dutch Grand Prix, where they're about averaging about half a second off pole. And then really big improvement there, and then they're back to about, being about the second or best qualifier over the last, quarter of the season or so. And you can see, last quarter of the season, very, very competitive between those final four, or the best 4 teams. Now, looking at Ferrari season and for the races broken down by quarter, again, it does kind of mirror the race results as well. So when you look at points, first quarter, they got about 200 points. Second quarter, about 150. Third quarter, again, about 150 as well. Actually, no, second quarter, I think, is just above 100. And then fourth quarter, over 200 points. So you can see really strong start, really poor middle, and a really strong finish. An average finishing position kind of matches that as well. So when you look at first quarter, average finishing position of about 4, second quarter, an average finishing position about 6. Some of Leclerc's race results, including British Grand Prix, where he was 2 laps down, will definitely pull that down quite a bit. But then you can see third quarter, fourth quarter, really solid progress with about 4, third quarter, and then the second quarter, it was basically the best it got all season with an average finishing position of about 3. When you look at Ferrari's last 5 seasons, looking at average minimum finishing position, so this is a little bit of a better stat than just the average for trying to get like a true sense of where the team was on pace. So you can see for Ferrari, things have really improved since 2020, which of course that awful season where they had that terrible engine. So you can see for qualifying performance, which is average starting position, which is the blue line, you can see they were basically about 8. So again, very, very bad. 2021, big progress up to about 4. 2022, their best season of the 5, where they had arguably the strongest car over 1 lap over the course of the season. Average minimum starting position about 2. And then unfortunately it gets a little bit worse 2023 and 2024. When you look at average finishing position, really similar trend for over those first 3 years, and you can see when the blue line is below the red line, that's where that indicates that the qualifying performance was better than the race day performance. And you can see 2022, 2023 qualifying performance was a bit better than the race day performance. And 2024 is actually the first year that's kind of flipped around. But again, similar to 2020 and 2021 in a way, in that there's not a massive gap there. But the race day performance, again, big improvement over 2023, and even about about the same or even slightly better than 2022, which was again a year where they started with arguably the best car, and then kind of things really went downhill, especially after the technical directive that came into effect at the 2022 Belgian Grand Prix. So again, for race pace, positive trend. Qualifying pace has actually been on a negative trend the last 2 years. So again, it'll be really interesting to see how things are in 2025. Of course, new driver Lewis Hamilton coming into the team as well. That will definitely make, I think there'll be a lot of headlines about that. I think it'll be really interesting to see how Hamilton is able to kind of embed himself into Ferrari, given that he's worked with Mercedes for 10 years and then drove for McLaren for about, let's see, 6 years before that. And again, both really British teams. He'll be a British driver, so it'll be really interesting to see how he, is able to get himself embedded in, a really different working environment in Ferrari. But I think really, really exciting. Though for Ferrari, Fred Vasseur has, I think, done a really good job since taking over from Mattia Binotto. And I think, if they have a very strong winter, there's no reason they can't, I think, fight for a drivers' championship or a constructors' championship in 2024. So there you go. There's my review of Ferrari's 2024 F1 season. Pretty good season, I think. Definitely a little bit better than perhaps expectations going into the year. But I do think, obviously, a bit disappointed, obviously, with how the season ended. Not able to win the constructors' championship at the last race in Abu Dhabi. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. That's all for my review for Ferrari. And that means that we have one more video left, and that is, of course, McLaren. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.